This is Michael Cowen, and welcome to Trial Lawyer Nation.
When the jury panel comes into the courtroom and the bailiff says, "All rise," I know we're here.
And it doesn't matter who they are, nobody should be above the law.
A lot of us talk about that, but you've actually done it.
That's how you also maintain quality control over your practice.
Yeah.
That's a question I get asked a lot, and here's the answer.
Welcome to the award-winning podcast Trial Lawyer Nation, your source to win bigger verdicts, get more cases, and manage your law firm. And now, here's your host, noteworthy author, sought-after speaker, and renowned trial lawyer, Michael Cowen.
Today on Trial Lawyer Nation, I am privileged to have a really good friend of mine, Tim Whiting. Tim is from Chicago. He's owner of the Whiting Law Group, does mostly trucking cases, but has had success in other areas through his career as well. How you doing today, Tim?
Great, Michael. Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be a guest today.
Really enjoyed spending time with you today. Tim was nice enough to come down to San Antonio, and we've been hanging out.
It's been a great day, Michael.
So, Tim, tell me, what kind of practice do you currently have?
Currently, we are doing mostly trucking accidents.
Why?
Well, the why is a longer question. Would you like me to start from the beginning?
I'll get into the beginning.
Okay.
Is there anything particular about trucking that drew you to it, I guess, before we get into your whole journey?
Sure.
It's a very cool story that I think everyone's going to want to hear.
Yeah, thanks. So the journey really started when I was a kid, because I grew up in a very small town in Wisconsin, very blue-collar town, and there was a lot of heavy machinery and a lot of farming. And when I met some very, very successful truck accident lawyers like Joe Freed and Michael Easerman and yourself and many others, I started to explore this world of handling trucking accidents and becoming very specialized at it, because it's such a complex kind of a case. And it just fit because of that blue-collar background. It just seemed to really feel great to do. And so I didn't have that passion for any other area of law until I got into the trucking world.
Yeah, I really like it because it's interesting, but also it's an area where the hard work and digging tends to bear fruit. You tend to, the more you dig, the more stuff you find that the company's doing wrong, and you expose it, and you feel like, I'm getting money from my client, but I'm also hopefully going to make the world a little safer.
Yeah, 100%. It's a very complex case. It's a very complex industry, and I feel that with lawyers like yourself and others, especially part of some of the trucking groups that we're a part of, there's some wonderful, great minds, and we keep going deeper, don't we? I mean, you and I have had some great success in trucking accidents, and then all of a sudden we go on some of these truck conferences and we hear from other people, and we're just amazed at a whole nother layer yet that's discovered.
Absolutely. Well, I want to start off, what did you start your journey towards being I guess we'd call it trucking trial lawyer, because there's two different components, being a true trucking lawyer and a true trial lawyer. What did you start? From what you're telling me, that was you started both those journeys at the same time?
Yes, it's a great question, by the way, and I'm pausing just because there's so many thoughts that just rush to my mind to answer that question. I think that it started when I moved to Chicago to start my legal career.
When was that?
That was in about 1996.
Okay, so what did you start off? Did you start off knowing you were going to be a trucking trial lawyer?
Absolutely not.
What did you start off doing?
Surviving.
Okay.
Putting food on the table.
I know how that feels, yeah.
Yeah. I came from very limited economic circumstances, and I put myself through school with a wrestling scholarship, and then I just worked construction and farming to pay for law school during the summers, and I really didn't have any legal experience. I have no one in my family that had a legal background. The town I grew up in was very blue-collar, so there wasn't a lot of big influences for me. And in fact, how I even chose to become a lawyer was because in fourth grade, my teacher had asked us all to do a book report on what we might want to do for a career. And all I remember at that point in my life was, we're poor, I don't want to be poor. So I went to the library and I stumbled on this book from Melvin Belli.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I don't think it was the King of Torts book, but it was one of his books. And here I'm reading about this, eccentric, wealthy, successful lawyer trying cases all over the world. And I was immediately locked in that I think that the way out of my circumstances is to become a lawyer, and that's really when it started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you move to Chicago after you get out of law school. You're, I guess, doing whatever you can get. What's your next step? How long are you doing that till something else happens?
Yeah, so I was a wrestler growing up most of my life, and my wrestling coach from Wisconsin was friendly with this personal injury lawyer who's focused mostly in medical malpractice cases, and his son was a very elite wrestler. And so my wrestling coach said, hey, you should just look him up. So I went down there. I didn't have a job. I was kind of sleeping on a friend of a friend's sofa, and I looked up this man named Louis Goldstein, and Louis heard that I might call through my wrestling coach, invites me up to his office downtown Chicago, and just takes me in like a son.
Awesome.
And Louis ended up introducing me to my first employer, which was a large insurance defense firm called Hinshaw & Culbertson downtown Chicago, which is now a national defense firm. And I worked there for about 4 years, and I really didn't make a lot of money as a defense lawyer. I was still struggling, and then I was also watching a lot of good and not so good plaintiffs' lawyers win large sums of money for their clients, and some were not really even compassionate, and some were, and both left an impression.
Yeah.
One of the kind of lawyer I wanted to be, and one was the kind I didn't want to be, but I know one thing, that was the side of the fence I needed to be on to be able to really kind of bring out my talents, which is my compassion and empathy for people and my desire to help, and then also to break out of my financial chains, if you will.
So when did you switch sides to the plaintiff side?
So it was 2001. I was about 5 years in as an insurance defense lawyer. I was miserable, and I went into my boss's office and I said, I'm quitting. I'm going to start my own plaintiff's firm. And he laughed, and he told me I'd be out of business in 6 months, that he'll keep my desk and chair open for me.
Well, that was nice.
Yeah, because he said that he was so certain I was going to fail. And, I didn't have any. I had a few plaintiff's cases just from college buddies that had gotten either rear-ended or, fell down somewhere, but very minor cases. So I started my law firm, Whiting Law Group, out of my apartment in 2001.
And so what was the progression then from, just being in your apartment, not having any clients other than a few friends that had something minor? So over the next 10 years, what was your progression?
Sure. Well, I could probably tell some really great stories for about 3 hours, but I don't think any of us want to stay here for that long. But the progression, there's really something to be said for when you're starving and how to survive, what you need to do to get successful, if that's what your goal is. And I was starving and hungry, and both, physically hungry and hungry for success. And those were huge motivators. And so from my apartment, I just started hustling, and I called up defense lawyers that I knew. I called up some of the plaintiffs' lawyers that I had met, and I just started meeting for coffee because I really couldn't afford to take them to lunch or dinner. I had no marketing materials, and I just started telling them, hey, I'm going to do great, and just had a little sales pitch, I guess, that I would be very available to their clients and get great results for them. And so, one case led to another, and then there were a few, within the first year or two, there was some decent results that I had just from kind of grassroots referrals. And they were a broad array of cases. One I recall specifically was a nursing home case. One was a fen-phen case, if you remember that litigation. And, those results helped me, one, get out of my apartment. Number two, I had raised some eyebrows in the legal community for being so brave and being so young. And one of the gentlemen that took note of it was one of the editors at the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin. And he was so impressed, he called me up, wanted my story, much like I'm telling you now. And he was so blown away that he had nominated me himself for one of the 40 under 40 top lawyers in Illinois, which I ended up getting, I think, my third year into my practice.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really great. And then things like that just really started to develop more referrals, and I did start to, become a better lawyer, and the cases got better, and I got better, and the results got better. And then over the next couple of years, we ended up getting an office suite, hiring my first lawyer, hiring my first assistant, led to another lawyer and a fourth lawyer and the third lawyer, and, several paralegals, and the caseload kept growing. And, by its peak, I would say around 2010, I was definitely meeting my goals that I didn't want to be poor anymore. I certainly wasn't. I had met some great successes, but I was pretty unhappy, Michael.
Why were you unhappy? I mean, and I've seen so much of it that people who have incredible financial success in our field are just miserable. Why were you unhappy?
Yeah, so I was entering my 40s, and I was starting. As you know, entering your 40s, you start to think ahead. Whereas in your 30s, you're just kind of thinking in front of you. And when I did that, I started to look ahead, and I thought to myself, well, I had at the time about 4 or 5 lawyers. I had close to 400 cases. They were anywhere from auto cases to medical cases to nursing home cases to just slip and fall cases. And, there were just constant internal headaches, constant client headaches. I wasn't trying cases. I always had this belief in myself that I'm very. I think I can be very good in front of a jury, but I was very scared to go in front of a jury because I had never had any formal training. I mean, I started the practice out of my office, and when I was at the defense firm, I did try probably about 10 cases. But as an insurance defense lawyer, all you have to do is kind of throw stuff at the wall, and it sticks sometimes, or sometimes you have to do nothing. The plaintiff just has a bad case, or the plaintiff's lawyer isn't that good. And so I didn't really consider those victories as a defense lawyer getting trial experience or training. And around 2010, I just had really kind of a personal one-on-one intervention with myself, and I thought I thought inside, if this is what it looks like the rest of the way, this is not what I want. I remember a saying we had growing up, which was, I'd rather dig ditches.
Right.
And nothing against ditch diggers, because they serve a great function in our society, but that clearly wasn't where my direction was going to be. And so, knowing that, I decided to make some drastic changes inside of my firm and with my career.
So what was your next step to try to combine? I mean, you don't want to give up the financial success, but you want to add some happiness and satisfaction. What did you do?
Yeah. So, I've always had this belief that if you take one step backward with the goal in mind, you're going to take 2 or 3 steps forward. That's a positive. And I had believed that in 2010, that I did probably need to release some of the financial success by taking a step backward to clear out the direction that I was going, because as you know, with 400 cases and 5 lawyers, you don't just wake up and say, okay, we're doing a different thing today.
Oh yeah.
So that thought and direction was a process, and within that process, about a year into it, I had reduced the cases to, around 250, and I had come down to about 3 lawyers, and things were already starting to feel better. And I had just randomly gotten a pretty serious truck crash and very sad. And the truck company had $1 million, and the loss was way more than $1 million. And I had enough sense at that time not to do what a lot of non-trucking lawyers would do, which is take the $1 million. And so I started just kind of looking through some websites and materials in the legal community. I had not been a part of AAJ at that point. I had not been a part of any real legal organization. And it just so happened that AAJ's summer convention was hosted in 2011 that summer in Chicago. And it was right around the time of this transformation and right around the time of this case. And I had gotten the flyer or the email with the agenda, and one of them was this truck litigation group. And they have a whole day at AAJ. And so I decided to go to my first AAJ conference and go to this truck group. And one of the topics was on If $1 Million Isn't Enough by Michael Leserman.
Yeah.
He had just won a big case against a shipper out in Oregon, I think it was. Yeah, it was a great case, kind of a landmark case, if you will, for our world, right, with shipper-broker litigation.
Even got punitive damages.
Even
against
got
the shipper.
even got punitive damages. Wasn't that wonderful? So I thought I'll go check out both the program and listen to Michael and try to pull him aside after to pick his brain about my case. The first speaker was a man by the name of Joe Freed, who's now become he is my mentor in this business, and he is really the one I owe probably the most gratitude for where I am today. And I heard him speak, and he was absolutely inspiring. And he told his story on the podium about how one day he also had it with, I think he was doing products and
he was doing product cases, fuel fed fire. I met him in the product world, and then met him again in the trucking world.
Yeah, and Joe, as you know, is a very talented trial lawyer.
Yeah.
And then he just took that skill into trucking. But how he did it was the story that just really spoke to me, because I was already in my transformation of wondering what my future was going to hold. And when I heard him talk about how he dropped everything and decided he wanted to be a truck accident lawyer, and that he had to commit his entire life to that, that was all I needed to hear. So I stuck around. I did listen to Michael, and in fact, I did track Michael down later. But the first person I tracked down was Joe Freed in the lobby of the Hilton downtown Chicago. And it was a great story, as Joe tells it today when he introduces me to many of the events that I speak at. I chased him down, Mr. Freed, and he turns around because he had to fly out that day, and he turns around and I said, Mr. Freed, I'm Tim Whiting. You never met me. I'd like to pick your brain. Your story really moved me. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, here's the deal, kid. I'll talk to you, but not if you call me Mr. Freed. Yeah. So that really kicked it all off.
Yeah, it's so funny because you and I, we've mentioned this. We always seem to we're like on parallel journeys. We seem to be going through the same. We're going through partnership issues at the same time. We're going through maybe some relationship stuff at the same time. We go through the same kind of legal stuff. And Joe and Michael were both transformational. I mean, Joe inspired me to be brave enough to, have a more trucking-focused practice and to write. And Michael Leserman still inspired me to try to write a book. And I still remember the conversation at the time. We were signing up like 25 to 35 auto wrecks a month. Non-commercial, mm-hmm. regular fender benders, and it brought in money, but it also kept taking me away from what I loved. And I remember I was at an AJ thing in New Orleans, and I was having lunch with Mike Leserman, and said, Michael, how did you get to where you are? I mean, how did you get at practice where you only have good trucking cases? And he says, well, I just said no to everything else. And it never occurred to me. I just thought if I just stayed on this hamster wheel, eventually all these big cases would just come in and the other ones would, I guess, go away. I don't know what I was thinking.
Right.
It took me a while after that to get the courage to follow through
mm-hmm.
In his suggestion. But those two people were transformational in my life, too. It's just amazing how much of an effect they've had on so many people.
And I wonder, Michael, if they really do know the effect that they've had on trial lawyers like ourselves. And I try to tell Joe, I think he actually is tired of me telling him that. But
I think they're too humble and down to earth to really believe how transformational they've been, which is part of why they're so awesome.
That's true. And, to address our relationship, because it's really special. And I want you to know I love you, Michael, like a brother.
You too.
And when we started working on the case that we started to work on together, we sat down for dinner, if you remember, in Chicago, and we both almost blurted out at the same time, hey, our lives, our personal lives and our professional lives have been on this very parallel path, and I think it's a really cool thing, and it's something that's really kept us connected and probably led us right here.
Yeah. Let's go to, I guess you did a broker case, I'm guessing, on that case where you didn't take the $1 million?
Right. So it was a very sad case, and it led me to that program, meeting Joe, ending up talking to Joe about how to do what you had that same conversation with Michael, which is how to become a truck accident trial lawyer. And Joe had said the same thing, drop everything and start to specialize in it and put it out to the world. And then the shipper case led me to a 2-day consultation with Michael and his wife Rena at their home in Ohio, and it was probably one of, at that time, the singular most greatest experiences I've had as a trial lawyer.
Really?
Yes. It was powerful. Watching Michael and Rena in their workroom tear apart the case and really mind map it from not only a way to win the case, but to go to trial and win the case. And that was something I had never done. And that's when I realized the second part of my journey, which was I need to become a trial lawyer, because that's really what's in my heart. I'm a fighter. I'm a warrior. I've been that since I was in first grade and started wrestling and fighting, and that's my spirit. And so I had been kind of covering that up, and then I hadn't had any training. And so that experience really led me to not only seeing that trucking was something that spoke to me and I was going to be passionate about, and I wanted my firm to become one of Illinois' first and only trucking accident-only law firms. But alongside of that, I realized that I needed to do a deep dive not only into the trucking world and learning to be a truck accident lawyer, but also to becoming a trial lawyer. So that took around 2012. And what I did was I started to take that one step back to go two forward. And so I went down to 2 lawyers, went down to less than 150 cases, and I gave most of the cases to my 2 associates, and one was a partner. And I just said, you guys work these cases up, keep the money coming in so we can keep the lights on. And I went on a journey of every single truck conference or seminar I could sign up for and attend. I started flying around the country and listening to people like you speak, and again, Michael and Joe and many other great truck accident lawyers. I started to join AAJ's truck litigation group. I joined, at that time, there was another trucking group out of St. Louis called the PITLA.
I was there for a year or two.
Yeah. And then that led to where we are now, right, with ATAA.
Yeah.
And so I started doing that, I would say, twice a month. I started subscribing to every magazine that I could in the trucking world. Transport Topics is one of those, I think, excellent resources. I started buying all the resources Joe Freed would keep talking about with all the rules in them, the driver manuals, the J.J. Keller ones, the preventability manuals, the regs, which are the holy grail or Bible, if you will, of the industry, the CDL manuals. I met people like Morgan Adams and Robert Collins, the deans of trucking that had resource after resource. And slowly but surely, I started to become more proficient at trucking. And as you know, when you start to manifest things in the world, they come back to you.
Yeah, your comment was being a trucking trial lawyer, because that's not as common as you think. There's a lot of great trial lawyers there that don't necessarily have all the trucking technical knowledge. They can put on a great case, but they may not realize all the ammo they have to really win their case or maximize their case. And then you have people that know, like, they can quote the regs chapter and verse without looking at them, but they may not necessarily be the most engaging, dynamic trial lawyers. It's people like Joe and Michael, and there's others. I don't want to name names or not name names, so if I didn't name your name, there's lots of people out there that are great. You're my friend, I love you, you're going to be fine. But it is a 2 totally different skill sets, and then integrating the 2 is even more difficult. Tell me about your journey then to try to become a great trial lawyer? Because it's a totally different thing.
Yeah, it's great question.
Sorry, it's wordy.
No, it's a good. Really, they have gone together for me in the parallel timing sense, but then they are very two distinct things, as you pointed out. So I really think the question is a wonderful question, and I was on the journey for both. And so as I was learning the trucking world, I started to get a few more trucking cases here and there, and was lowering my caseload at the time. Then I went also on a journey of trying to learn how to be a trial lawyer. And as you know, there was the reptile implosion at the time. There was many other trial guides. For AAJ was a wonderful resource. There was a lot of different trial courses that you can attend around the United States, and I was attending as many of those as I could. Paul Scopter did a lot of work up in Milwaukee, which was close by, so I would go up and see him, and he was a wonderful teacher as well for trial techniques. And then I started to also go to some of it wasn't necessarily trial lawyers college, but it was. Okay. And that happened around 2014. I went out to Aspen for a jury selection weekend focus. Uh-huh. And it was held by Mel Orchard and Tyson Logan over at Jerry Spence's law firm. Yeah. And Jesse Wilson was there, a good friend of ours.
Oh, that's where you met Jesse, okay.
That's where I met Jesse. And, as they say in that movie Goodfellas, my life was never the same after I met Jesse Wilson. But that experience spoke to me deeply, much like the one after listening to Joe speak in 2011 at AAJ about the trucking world. And it felt right that this was the course I needed to take, or the methods, I guess, I needed to learn to become the trial lawyer that I knew I could be and can be. And so I started to explore more of the trial lawyer college techniques, and started to meet more graduates of the trial lawyers college, and it started to influence me while I continued to study as many other type of trial lawyer courses like Reptile again, and many others. And then I started to go to trial during those couple years and started to see the results and the success that came from being intentional about being trained as a trial lawyer. When I grew up and was wrestling, I had this little saying on my bedroom door that I would look at every morning at 6 a.m. when I wanted to just curl up and stay in bed, and it said, "Champions aren't born, they're built." Uh-huh. You have to build them, right? And so that phrase stuck with me, and really in all of my life, in my academic career, my wrestling career, and now my legal career. And I don't think trial lawyers are born. And so while I'm not a young trial lawyer, I am a late bloomer, I guess I'd call myself, into the trial world. But I am on fire to become one of the best trial lawyers I can be, and hopefully be recognized as such around the United States in the next 10 or 15 years. And I'm very committed to that. And I started that journey, again, around 2014. But I realized trial lawyers aren't born. You really do have to build them. And all those years I spent just laying the groundwork of exploring all the different ways to get trained as a trial lawyer, because there's so many, as you know. And there's consultants, like Paul Scopter that were, that I know he's no longer with us, but, so many like that I was also starting to have interactions with and learn from. And everybody had a little bit of a different way and method. And that all led me to not only starting to get trained as a trial lawyer and start to use some of the techniques that worked for me, but again, going back to the trial lawyers college, it was like, I want to go to trial lawyers college.
And you finally went.
And I finally went.
How you just went this year?
I did.
And so we are 21 years apart on that one. We've not had parallel journeys there.
Right.
So what was it like?
Well, first I have to thank my good buddy Eric Penn, because Eric as you know, had that $90 million verdict against Warner last year, and we had become very close before that verdict. And he also was a big inspiration into becoming a better trial lawyer. And he attributed a lot of his success to the Trial Lawyers College. And he kept saying, "You are perfect for this."
Yeah, I agree with that, by the way.
Thank you. And others started to say that to me as well. And again, I told you, it spoke to me deep down, separate from that. So I needed to go to Trial Lawyers College, and at my age, it was a little bit of a difficult thing to do because of my practice being
taking multiple weeks off.
Yeah, and you're I think it's probably so the I don't know that it's easier to go as you're younger. I'm not sure. But it led to an interesting question that you and I actually talked about when I got back. If you recall, that kind of led to the discussion about possible section in this podcast about, is it better to go to Trial Lawyers College as a young lawyer, or is it better to go after you've had some experience?
Well, let's trade our ideas, because I went as a 3-year lawyer. I was an associate in a law firm, so I didn't have any of the pressure of worrying about running a law firm or finances. I mean, I had a boss that was paying me to go there. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have bad habits. I probably tried, less than 5 cases probably when I went there. So I didn't have any bad habits to overcome. Plus, my boss who was sitting me there was a 1994 first class of Trial Lawyers College. So the method I was being taught on how to try a case was from a Trial Lawyers College grad. So I never had that. So from that point of view, I think I had a leg up. The disadvantage, I think, of being 28 is I don't know that I was emotionally available and willing to be as open with everything that I am now. And so there's other aspects of it as far as, part of being a good trial lawyer is you have to discover yourself and get past your own BS to be able to go and fully advocate for someone else's story. I don't know that I was quite ready to share all my BS with other people fully and honestly at the age of 28. So I think it was probably a couple years after that at a TLC grad program where I was finally able to be a protagonist in a psychodrama and to not self-edit, to fully open up and trust the group. And frankly, that I've had success throughout my career, but I think one of the things where I've held myself back was not fully trusting the jury. Yeah. Just like I didn't fully trust other people to fully be myself and open up whatever I have inside me in a psychodrama in front of people. And when you don't trust other people, they're not going to fully trust you and do the right thing for you. And so, on one hand, it was good because the techniques I learned, and then I started the journey a lot younger. On the other hand, there were probably far more mature 28-year-olds than I was at the age of 28, but having I was 28 and in a month when I started, and I just wasn't where I am now. But I'm glad I did it the way I did it, because that's the only journey I've been on.
Right, and so that's a hard question to answer, right?
Yeah, how about you?
So I can give you the perspective if you had maybe gone at the age we're at both now. You're bordering 50, I think, and I'm at 51. So, and I want to be very open about something, which was when I went, I had a lot of insecurity, and the insecurity came from both not ever really being trained as a trial lawyer, and having gone down the road for a couple of years, I'd learned, and I'd been in trial a few more times than I had in the past, and I've saw the techniques starting to show success in my skills as a trial lawyer. But thinking that I'm on the older end of the class, and I just felt that insecurity made me feel like maybe I wasn't good enough, that maybe I was too old, maybe I should just stay on all these questions. Maybe I should just stay on this journey and settle everything from now until the end of my career. But that just isn't what I want. And so, I got on that plane and got off that plane and got on the bus and made that journey to the ranch. And so, I think that was one component of my reflection, which is I'm not sure I would have had those same insecurities as a younger lawyer, but maybe I would have. And then I think the other thing that I believe I would advocate for somebody going at my point in the career is the flip side of what you described, which is that I had quite a few challenges in my life. One was a really, really long-term, unhealthy relationship that had ended, and it really took me down a notch. But it led me to therapy, and it really therapy led to a deep self-exploration into a lot of things in my life. The role of drinking, alcohol, the role of my insecurities, the role of judgment, and codependency, and all these things that I thought were limiting me personally. But when I went to trial lawyers college, I saw the tie into how it was limiting me as a trial lawyer.
Absolutely.
And so that experience at my age, if you want to look at it from either an age thing or a specific experience, the therapy because of a bad relationship, then you could just take it and say, well, maybe everybody should go to therapy first and then go to trial lawyers college, or vice versa. I'm not sure, but it really was a profound experience for me because of, I think, the experiences I had in life to that point, the emotional maturity I had through therapy, the willingness to face my issues, and trial lawyers college just took that and took it to a whole nother level, which has made me, I say to all my friends back home that the guy that went to trial lawyers college is not the same guy that has come back.
That's good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Each year, the law firm of Cowen Rodriguez Peacock pays millions of dollars in co-counsel fees to attorneys nationwide on trucking, commercial motor vehicle, and product liability cases. If you have a case involving death or catastrophic injuries and would like to partner with our firm, please contact us. We would be honored to review the case in detail, discuss where we believe we can add value, and create a mutually beneficial partnership. You can reach Delisi Friday by calling 210-941-1301 or send an email to podcast@triallawyernation.com. She will coordinate a time for Michael Cowen to speak with you in person or by phone to discuss the case in detail. And now, back to the show.
Well, first of all, I'd agree everyone that does what we do for a living should do therapy. It should try it at least. Not just because we have a huge problem with anxiety, depression, drug abuse, infidelity, suicide, and everything that comes with it. Just from all the trauma that we absorb and all the pressure we put ourselves into. Actually, a lot of it's self-imposed in this field. But also just you have to get past your own roadblocks in order to truly represent somebody else in the courtroom, because you have to get past your own insecurities and hang-ups so that you don't worry about yourself anymore and you're only worried about the story and your client and doing the right thing. And when that happens, that's when the magic happens, because then you can truly connect with the jurors. You can truly, because it's not about you anymore.
Yeah.
And so, but for when to go to trial lawyers college, if that's what you want to do, and I think if you want to be a trial lawyer, you should at least try it. It's not for everybody. I'm glad I went. I've had an open offer to other lawyers at my firm for over 20 years. No one's taken me up on it. I think I finally have an associate that wants to go, and I've said for 20 years, I will pay for it and I will pay you while you're there. But it's not for everybody, and I don't, we have some fine lawyers that haven't gone to it, but I think if you can do it, because it is so hard, no matter where you are, I wouldn't wait for the right time. If you're at a point in your life where you can take the 3 weeks off, you can get in, you apply, you get in, you can take the time off, financially do it. It's just, you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Yeah, and Michael, on that point, it was really interesting because after these experiences where people were like you were telling me, hey, you're the perfect fit for trial lawyers college. It wasn't like I went the next summer. It was years that had gone by, and then Eric Penn again had really pushed hard this last round, and even then I started to, as it was coming up on the time to leave, I even was like, oh, I can't do this. I have this going on. I have this. And then when I get back, I have this. And your mind can just play some really strong tricks to talk you out of going.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I have an awesome team of lawyers at my office and paralegals. And my team was just like, we got this. Yeah. We got the office. You go. And they said, because when you come back, we're going next year. Awesome. And so my team's going to go. It's going to be great.
They also have really good grad programs. So, although when I went, I think I really got a lot of the trial skills stuff. And like I said, I think I wasn't as emotionally open then, but a few years later, when I was at a grad program, I was. And so then I kind of completed. To me, I got the fully TLC probably a couple years after I got out. Which, ironically, is when I got asked to be on staff. I guess maybe someone else noticed that I finally flipped the switch, or I kissed the right person's ass. I don't know what happened.
Well, Trial Lawyers College is a very interesting community, isn't it? Mm-hmm. My experience was nothing but 100% positive, and I grew as a person, and I didn't think I could grow anymore after therapy and my age and everything. And
there's always more,
right? There are always more, and it's really interesting though to see how much of a different person I am in the world because of Trial Lawyers College. And one of the things that has been noticeably different is just how I interact in my own office with my team, and one of my real good classmates at TLC, Sam Nordine, had suggested that we do this when we get back at his. He has his own office as well, and he was saying, "Hey, we should do the reenactment of the greatest scene of our life, but do it with our office staff." And I thought that was brilliant, and so we did it at the office.
Oh, cool!
Oh, it was one of the greatest team building experiences I've ever had at my law firm, and we had a blast doing it. And they notice and have noticed a change in me is that I don't feel as anxious. I feel more confident in my skills, and I'm ready to become that trial lawyer.
Now the work is to keep that,
exactly,
and not let the whirlwind of life take that away from you. And for me, that's been an up and down. I get it back, and I kind of start let it go again, and I fight to get it back. But I encourage you to be purposeful in trying to keep that spirit. Well,
Michael, it's a great insight and great thought, because that is the challenge, and I have a few thoughts on that.
Okay.
That I've really had to reflect, because when you go to Trial Lawyers College and you come home. For me, I don't have a family yet in my life. Well, I want one, and we'll get one. I don't now. And so there's a profound emptiness just in the transition back, so to speak, to the real world.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Well, so if you...
Going from where people actually listen to you when you talk to back to the regular...
And, every morning getting up and by the time you go to the bathroom, you've hugged 4 or 5 people, and they told you they love you and you love them. It's kind of like all of a sudden you wake up and there's nothing but a pin drop in your home, right?
Living in the commune is nice.
Yeah. So anyway, but the insights that I wanted to share about that, about keeping that beautiful thing that we experience at Trial Lawyers College, about slowing things down and really being present and listening not to say something, but really listening to understand, which was one of the big things. And I thought Josh Carton was amazing, by the way. I mean, what a brilliant guy. And he worked with me a little bit, and that was so profound. But Josh had talked about this listening aspect, and I think that going into the insight of how to keep that is just in your everyday life, whoever you're talking to, really work to listen, to really understand what that person is saying, and kind of get out of yourself, which is what we want to do in front of a jury. So it's good practice. It's a win-win. And the other person really loves you because of it, because everybody wants to be heard.
Yeah.
But so that's one way. And then I think from a lawyer or trial lawyer and law firm perspective, how to keep it, and I guess we'll find out. We can revisit this in 10 years. How's that, buddy? But I think what led me into doing just trucking accidents as my sole practice area is leading to taking less cases. It's leading to being able to focus on a couple of these truck cases where you can just really, like you said, there's so many layers, right? And you can just keep going deep and deep, and you put on this case that it's magical when you do the deep dive into only a few cases. Well, I think the overlap of that is that also allows you to be present, like at Trial Lawyers College, both for that client and those cases, versus having 200 some cases of all different kinds of areas, and you're bouncing off the walls, which is what was happening to me in 2010, where now with the whole progression of going into just specializing in handling truck accidents, having some success in the area, and then going to trial lawyers college because I wanted to become a successful trial lawyer. Now I have the two foundations. I have the focus in my practice area and the success to really start to build on that foundation. And now I have the trial skills and methods to go do it. And so that singular, if you will, focus feels a lot like when I was at Trial Lawyers College, because I don't have to deal with all these other headaches now. I don't have a million emails a day, and I don't have a million clients calling and complaining. I only have a few of those. And so now I can embrace the whole Trial Lawyers College experience. And I guess, like you said, we'll check in with each other, see how that goes.
And the awesome thing about having a few clients is you're calling them to tell them what's happening rather than them calling you to complain that they haven't heard from you. It is and I actually have to credit Rodney Jew for, I'd already been bringing it down some, but I have to really credit Rodney Jew for opening my eyes to the possibility of living my life the way I want to live it, with fewer cases and being an artist and really working up each one and digging deep into each one. Like I said, I know you've worked with Rodney. What was besides you've worked with Paul, you mentioned Paul Scopter, you had some time with Leserman, you worked with Freed, then of course the Trial Lawyers College is major. Anyone else you've worked with that's been like a big influence on how you've worked up your cases or how you've had success?
Yeah, so, there's a couple of things in that question, right? One was you asked me about Rodney Jew, and Rodney, I have worked with Rodney, and it was actually the case we just resolved, and that was really a powerful experience, both from a way to really get down to the core of what the case is really about, right? And I think that's the hardest thing for us and requires us to take less cases, which is what Rodney preaches, and I think he's absolutely 100% right. If we want to be great trial lawyers and we want to get to the heart of a case and we want to get all the necessary admissions from the defense and do the great job in the depositions and preparation for trial, we need to have those focuses on a smaller amount of cases. And Rodney was brilliant in doing that, both in talking about it in general, and then when working with him, taking a case apart, and he calls it the purple box, right? Yeah, and that's the defense box, right? Basically, and we all want to go there and defend that box, and Rodney's, I think, really genius in saying, hey, don't fight in the purple box.
Fight where you're going to win.
Fight where you're going to win. And so one of the greatest sayings I have that ties into what you just said, by the way, I just have to mention it. We have it etched in our whiteboard in our focus jury room back in my office that we built. And it's the saying that Joe Freed will be forever infamous for, which is, how can they be right and we still win? Yeah. And that's the essence of Rodney's purple box, right? And so we need to step out of that defending every issue in our case and really getting to the core of what is our case and what is the case about. And as Eric Penn always says, who's the most important juror in the room, right? It's us. We have to believe the case. Absolutely. And to get to do that, you have to get to the core of the case. So Rodney was a huge influence, is a huge influence. I plan on working with him again, hopefully. The others, though, that have an influence, have been in the ATA programs. We've done weekends with Josh Carton. Yeah. He's absolutely brilliant. I love Josh. He's a very interesting guy, and I know he's been on the program, and I was on the edge of my seat listening to it. Michael, you do a wonderful job, I have to tell you.
It's listening.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's pretty cool. But that Josh has had an influence, and then Jesse Wilson, who's kind of a version of Josh, and they bring different talents. But Jesse and I have worked closely together many times, and he's been brilliant to work with. And there's been others, but I think all of those individuals have helped. The other things that have helped is I don't know Nick Rowley, but I am absolutely like in love with this guy. I mean,
I want to meet him so bad. He's agreed to be on the show, but we haven't been able to get the schedules to work out yet.
Oh, can I come when he's here? I want to come up because
Well,
it might be.
I'll be flying out to meet him probably. So it'll either be in California or Iowa. Or wherever.
Okay.
I mean, have jet. We'll travel. Wherever
Yeah.
Nick will meet me, I
Yeah.
will be there, and I will spend time. Even if it wasn't on the podcast, if I can just spend an hour learning from Nick Rowley, I want to do it.
Well, he's had such a big influence on me as a trial lawyer, and again, it just tied in perfectly with the Trial Lawyers College experience. When the book Trial by Human came out, and Running with the Bulls, and just he's done some trial guide, coffee talks, I guess.
Yeah.
And I every time I hear him speak, I can't get enough of what he has to say. In fact, I sent my two associates, Jen and Ashley, when I was at Trial Lawyers College, out to his program in Iowa.
Oh, yeah.
And they also came back huge Rowley disciples, and they got to meet him, and I haven't even got to meet this guy yet. But he's had a big influence on me because I also feel there's some sort of connection with my personality and my spirit that I relate to him, how he is using his abilities to connect with the jury, and how just by doing it, just by being really vulnerable and honest. And I think that's a big part of me.
I think it's so important that we study and learn from different people because they really have different facets. I mean, one of the things I love about the Trial Lawyers College is you learn really good communication skills, and you learn how to reverse roles with people and get an emotional story. But then I've seen a lot of people get out of trial college and they think that's all you need to do, and they'll go there and they won't have read all the documents, they won't have thought what all their elements of proof are, what you need to protect your appeal, and flounder. Because
right.
they just, or even is the story that came out in the psychodramatic recreation, is that consistent with the physical evidence of the case, or you're going to get torn to bits because it's not. It's the reality in someone's head. It's an emotional truth. It's not exactly if you took a film of what was happening, what you would have seen at the time. It's an important aspect, but it's not a complete aspect of everything you need to know to try a case. I think Rodney Jew has been transformational on digging deep and getting intellectual. And, he talks about eliciting emotion, and I think his stuff does elicit emotion, but it doesn't dive into the emotional stuff. Same way like David Ball, who's brilliant in his way of breaking down a case and analyzing it and presenting it in a way. Both Rodney and David are really good about presenting it in a way that people can actually understand. It's not rambling. It makes sense. It gets your point across. And then, you talk about Jesse Wilson, Sar de la Motte, Josh Carton, how to actually communicate with people and make them want to hear you and get across and, be dynamic and interesting. It's just to really, you got to do all of it. That doesn't mean you have to do all of it before you try your first case, but if you want to master this field, it means you got to put the work in lots of different people. You can't just say, well, I went to this one program and now I'm a master. You have to not just go, you have to work with different people and keep doing it until you master it.
Well, it kind of goes back to the thing that hung on my door, right?
Yeah.
That trial lawyers aren't born. You have to build them.
Yeah, and it's a lot of work.
And it's a lot of work, and we have to keep a balance. But at the same time, I think as a trial lawyer, we do have to accept that it's a big part of who we are, and that is also where we spend our time. And that I think we all struggle with that in our personal life. But if we manage to have the right people around us that support us, no matter what, that they understand that passion that we bring and requires our time to be really good at what we do.
Absolutely, because when I'm out there working with Rodney or we're working with Jesse or somebody else, I am loving what I do. It's not like I feel like I'm making any sacrifice whatsoever.
Oh, absolutely. It's pretty terrific stuff, and I find it. There was something I wanted to say though about Nick Rowley and Josh Carton and Jesse Wilson and Joe and Michael and Eric Penn and guys like you, Trial Lawyers College. And my experience with all of those folks, Paul Scopter, and other trial lawyers, by the way, that I met at Trial Lawyers College, I found brilliant, and that I've met along the way. And I don't mean to leave anyone out because there's been a ton. But one of the things that was my biggest takeaway, and it was an evolution both from a life standpoint, which is the whole therapy issues and relational issues, to the turning to specialization in trucking, to turning to wanting to be a trial lawyer. And these individuals, and Nick Rowley really, I think, really brings this out the most, which is this creativity that we as trial lawyers haven't either discovered or embraced. And I, being one of them, in fact, a lot of my friends joke because I've had a couple of homes in my lifetime, and I've worked with designers, and I ended up always getting in fights with the designers because there's something inside of me. I just love that I have a creative side, and I've really never nurtured that side of it. And when I would do the design stuff, it would just come out, and again, it would conflict with them because of their egos, right? Yeah. But I didn't realize it at the time, but then all those people and experiences in Trial Lawyers College led me to really embrace, and therapy led me to embrace that I'm actually a very creative person. And I thought, well, but I can't. That doesn't fit with being a trial lawyer, but it does, and that's what Trial Lawyers College and many of these other individuals we just mentioned bring out. And so what's happened since Trial Lawyers College for me is I've committed myself to honoring this creative side of me. And it sounds maybe a little silly and whatever, but when at Trial Lawyers College they have you paint.
Right.
Isn't that a great experience? And they, Jerry came up with this thing of paint your soul, whatever that is that comes on that canvas, and then you have to explain why that's your soul. And that experience for some reason brought me such joy. And when I came home, I realized what that joy was that I am a very creative person, and I need to start implementing that into my trial work, because that's what guys like Nick Rowley are doing.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what Jerry did, and that's what Trial Lawyers College is about. And so I want to give you a really good example, because I think it's going to turn into something very powerful in our firm. And my associates, Jen and Ashley, absolutely love this. So we were getting ready for trial, as you know, 2 weeks ago. And there was a real issue as to were we right or were they right? And the focus groups were half and half. We did a whole empirical study of 300 people, and they were more in favor of the doctor. And that study came back 3 days before trial, and we had a pretty decent offer on the table. So things were really getting hairy, and the whole burden of proof was becoming a very important instruction in the case. Yeah. And so, I know there's a ton of different opinions out there. Do you address a burden of proof in jury selection, or is that a weakness when you're trying to tell people we don't have to show you 100%, right? I subscribe to the theory of leave the burden of proof, because really people are deciding on what they feel is right. So it's jury selection is where you're going to get your burden of proof, because you're going to get people that are either going to have leanings towards your case or not. And so hopefully you get a good jury. But what I have come to decide as the burden of proof is that we just have to prove more likely than not, right? More probably true than not. And there's been so much out there about, just those scales, the 50-yard line, the this or that, right? And Jen and I and Ashley were in the focus group room late one night. We were, riffing about this burden of proof in our case, because it was going to be such a close call. And so I said, hey, guys, isn't it that we just have to be more right than they are? Isn't that the burden of proof? And so we just all jumped out of our chairs, and we started mapping out a board on the burden of proof about we just have to be more right than they are. And we started to come up with all the reasons why we were more right than they are. And then in the sake of accountability, because as you know, juries are really moved by this vulnerability and this honesty about that we're here out of fairness. So out of fairness, because the trial is about fairness, here's the list also, though, that the defendants are right about. And inevitably, we came down to that, let's say in our case, we had 10 things we were right about, and we listed about 6 things they were right about. So we're more right than they are. And there's no weakness in that, because that's what they're, at the end, are told the legal the legal instruction or the law is, and so it's fresh in their mind, and all they have to do is go back there and say that in their head: is the plaintiff more right than the defense? And I think I have discovered the way to handle burden of proof, at least for me and my firm and my lawyers, and I think that's how we're going to use that. And that came from, though, that example is from that creativity, because I would not have embraced that. I would have said, "Oh, that's Tim's idea." I would judge myself. We've talked a lot about this, how you and I have this similar way of judging ourselves, and so it has a way of not allowing our creativity out. So take it for what it's worth, but I think we should embrace our creative side, because I think just the fact that we're all trial lawyers, we have a creative side. We just need to let it come out.
I could keep talking all night, and actually I am, because we're going to have dinner together. But we do need to start wrapping the show up, and I don't want to leave. You've had a couple of incredible successes lately. I know you had, was it $9 million on one case, and then you had a trucking case that was even better than that.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that case and how you've just kind of taken everything you've learned and, first of all, what was the result, if you can tell me?
Yeah, so the trucking case was the $9 million case,
okay.
Yeah. And we settled it midnight before jury selection. I had our good friend, Pete Kessner, was handling the negotiations with the defense and their insurance company. So our team was just drilling down on getting ready for trial, and that in itself, I have to say, if there's ever a big case, to get someone like Pete to really handle the negotiations, because as you know, as soon as you start down that road, it takes you off the preparing road, and so that was a big help. So I wanted to just mention that, but yeah, this case was wonderful. So it was against the one of the largest carriers in the country. We faced two of the top defense firms in Chicago, excellent defense lawyers. And all the experiences of going to all these conferences for 7 or 8 years, learning from Joe, Michael, you, everyone else, Eric Penn, and seeing it come out in this case, because this case had every issue imaginable.
So what happened?
So it was a large carrier, and they were hauling double trailers, and the trucker went out around 10 p.m. one evening, and he just had come off the off ramp, and he was merging into the interstate, and the second trailer had separated, and it had come to a rest right in the merge lane of a major interstate in Chicago, and the trailer sat on its on its nose, and no lights, and on an angle, so the conspicuity tape really wasn't a big reflecting factor. And so our guy was driving home from after working out, and there was no distraction involved, there was no drinking involved, and he was in his pickup truck, and he was coming down the merge lane and just missed. He saw the trailer because he did react, swerved, but it took off almost the entire side of his pickup truck from the corner of the trailer. And he spun around, and he ended up having a mild traumatic brain injury and multiple orthopedic injuries. And so, it was a very challenging case, because the brain injury was hotly contested, and our client had gone through some drug issues, and so there was a lot of interplay of, well, was he delayed at all because of the brain injury, or is it because of the drug use? And so we had to deal with that. And so that was the kind of the damage side of things. And it was, I think there were probably 6 medical experts on both sides for that stuff. And then on the liability side, they had come up with a defense of, comparative, and
why'd you run into our big old
right.
trailer?
How'd you not see it? And the truck driver had, I think, personally made up a story after the fact that 30 cars had gone by and this car didn't.
Yep.
But it had some traction, and so we had to deal with it. And so what the turning point, and to answer your question of how everything that I had learned came out in this case, was all these issues, knowing how to handle them, both from the liability and damage side and the brain injury side, which we all know is a
it's a whole other area.
Yeah, and I brought in Dorothy Clay Sims, by the way, to help, and what a brilliant.
Yeah. So how did you make it about the company? I mean, because so you've got, first of all, did you ever figure out why the trailer did not stay attached to the other trailer?
Yeah, so I fly down to take the 30B6 depths of the maintenance and safety guys. Joe Freed's down there. I look Joe up. I say, Joe, I'm down here for these depths. You want to have dinner? He says, come by the office. We end up sitting in his desk, and we start role-playing the depths, just out of the blue. We didn't plan on this. And and it was awesome. So Joe and I came up with this theory that there's only two reasons a trailer separates. It's either driver error or mechanical error. And so I went and took the two depths the next day. I got both of them to admit there's only two reasons. Then I got them to admit that this company has had over 300 trailer separations in the last 3 or 4 years at their company.
Oh, wow.
And that none of them were due to mechanical error, which means there's only one explanation, driver error.
300 times.
So what we did was 300 times, and we took that information, we amended our pleadings, and this was, again, something that I've learned, and I firmly believe in every truck case there's a punitive.
Right.
There's a chance at punitive damages, and all of us doing trucking accidents should always be considering punitive damages in all of our truck cases moving forward, if they haven't already. And we went back, we asked the judge to amend the pleadings to add a punitive count, and that's how, because Illinois doesn't allow for, the double counts of negligence when they admit agency.
Right.
You can't. They get to brush the negligent training and monitoring and supervision and hiring and all that. Unless you get to the punitives. So the judge granted our motion. So now we got to the punitives, but it wasn't over yet. So then we went into this whole other similar incidences, the OSI model, and we started developing all these other trailer separations at the company. That it was all driver error. They had a policy that they came up with in 2005. And we got them to talk about that little meeting they had in 2005 that they determined that there was a needed policy to address their trailer separation issues, and that in that meeting room, if you will, that they made the determination that the cause of it was driver error due to complacency. And so how do you combat complacency, right? You train.
Training, monitoring, yeah.
Monitoring, supervision. And that's how we fell into making it about the company.
Well, I love that, because now it's your client's few seconds to react versus you've had 299 chances to get this right. Why does the 300th person have to get so hurt?
The famous Steve Gersten exhibit, right? Have you seen his exhibit?
Yeah.
He's where he's got the clock where the driver had 5 seconds and the company had about 3 years. Yeah.
I mean, that's brilliant.
It's brilliant.
Overcomes, and I guess $9 million, they agreed you did something right.
Well, yeah, because we did have a lot of issues on the damage side. There really were a lot of questions of whether our client had a brain injury. So I think the punitive damages and allowing that evidence to be in front of the jury really put a lot of pressure on the truck company to settle the case. And it was contentious right to that moment about midnight.
Yeah.
And we were ready to go. And I think, it was disappointing that we didn't get to go to verdict. However, as you know, and we've talked today about this, sometimes there's just a number that only was a number, by the way, because we fought so hard.
Yeah.
But it's a number that makes it really risky to put on a trial.
Well, at the end of the day, it's about your client, not about you.
Mm-hmm.
And as much glory as you get from a trial and the victory, the only thing you can get for your client is money. And $9 million on a case where a jury might think you're right, be furious with the trucking company, award $3 million, give you a hug afterwards because they love you and they want to tell you what a great thing they just did for you.
Yeah.
Not saying that would happen, but when that's a real risk,
yeah,
to turn down the $9 million just because you want to get the ego of a trial and a big victory and be able to brag is not right for the client. And I think not only did you do an incredible job on the case, because that was a tough case and that was an incredible outcome, but you also did the right thing in being humble enough to put your client first, because you go out and try the case and you don't do as well, you get either 0 or 5 million or 7 million, you're going to do fine. You're going to go on, even a 0, you're going to go on to your next case and you're going to make it back. Your client has one case, and you did the right thing.
No, I thank you, Michael. It was quite, that case in itself was quite a journey, and again, I I think it really brought me into the trial lawyers because it happened right before I went to trial lawyers college. It brought me right to the point where I'm ready to be that trial lawyer and trucking lawyer. And so there were so many positives that came from that case, and I have so many people to thank, including my own team. I feel really great in my career right now. We just wrapped up that other case last week. That was a great result, and I think that we're really ready to take the world by storm in the trucking world.
Well, I'm looking forward to having you back on when you get your next great big verdict or settlement, and you can tell us how you did it.
Michael, thank you for having me. Like I said, I love you, man. You're great.
Love you too, brother. Thank you for joining us on Trial Lawyer Nation. I hope you enjoyed our show. If you're listening to this episode on a mobile device, please click on Ratings and Review and leave our show a 5-star rating and write a review. And if you're listening to this episode from our website, please leave a 5-star rating on the episode page. We'd love to reach more listeners, and doing this will help more attorneys find this podcast. You can also visit our website at www.triallawyernation.com to opt into our mailing list so you can stay updated on our new episodes. I promise we won't spam you. And thanks to your feedback, we've improved our podcast website. There's now a resources tab that you can click that shows you all the books we've mentioned on our podcast. If you have a Facebook account, please send us a request to join a private group called Trial Lawyer Nation Insider Circle. This exclusive group will allow you to hear about our guests before an episode airs, interact with the show, and get a sneak peek at some of the behind-the-scenes moments. I love to hear from all of you, and our Table Talk episodes are based solely on questions from our fans. So please continue to send us emails at podcast@triallawyernation.com. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to having you with us next time on Trial Lawyer Nation.
Each year, the law firm of Cowen Rodriguez Peacock pays millions of dollars in co-counsel fees to attorneys nationwide on trucking, commercial motor vehicle, and product liability cases. If you have a case involving death or catastrophic injuries and would like to partner with our firm, please contact us. We would be honored to review the case in detail, discuss where we believe we can add value, and create a mutually beneficial partnership. You can reach Delisi Friday by calling 210-941-1301 or send an email to podcast@triallawyernation.com. She will coordinate a time for Michael Cowen to speak with you in person or by phone to discuss the case in detail. This podcast has been hosted by Michael Cowen and is not intended to, nor does it create the attorney-client privilege between our host, guest, or contributors and any listener for any reason. Content from the podcast is not to be interpreted as legal advice. All thoughts and opinions expressed herein are only those from which they came.